Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Overhaul Eagle Eye podcast. I am joined today by two fantastic individuals. Firstly, Chuck Forsaith. He is the Vice President of the Healthcare Distribution Alliance. And then also our very own Ron Greene, who is the Executive Vice President of Risk and Intelligence here at Overhaul. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Dave. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, Chuck. One of the great things about doing these podcasts is that we all have our own backgrounds. And so I get a lot of questions about my Halo plaques and my Microsoft memorabilia in the background. You have got the Starsky and Hutch car behind you there. Tell me, you got to tell me a little bit about what's going on there.
Back when I worked for a pharmaceutical firm before I joined the HTA, there were two of us that were in charge of all investigations relating to the diversion or the theft of product. The other fellow was a fellow by the name of Rich Whittam. Rich and I worked together and solved a number of cases of product theft and diversion of that product. So one Christmas, I get this gift in the mail, and it has a return address of Whittam. And before I opened it, I called him on the phone. I said, I didn't get you anything. What the heck is this for? And he laughed and he goes, open it up. And sure enough, it was the Ford Torino from the Starsky and Hutch series. That was 22 years ago. So I've had that on my desk for 22 years, much to the chagrin of the housekeeper that maintains my office, having to dust it all this time. But that's why I have.
Well, these are the little pieces of memorabilia that you pick up over time, but they all have a story around them, and it's kind of it's quite apt in terms of your work in the healthcare industry in particular. I mean, the HDA is really responsible for you guys are the guiding light in terms of really helping the industry understand the risks, and then also producing some of the guidelines around how the industry actually needs to work. What are you seeing over the last sort of 6 months from an overall perspective? And Ron will get into this as well. But we're just seeing an increase in thefts, an increase in crime, a more organized structure out there, in the field, if you like. What are you seeing from an HDA perspective, and what are your members talking about?
We're a unique industry in that because we sell consumable products, we're a little bit more. And this isn't a knock against the people that distribute electronics or jewelry or tobacco or anything like that. But we're a lot more careful in how we select who it is that we do business with. Our vetting processes are a little bit more detailed. We're more apt to do business with someone that we've known for a long period of time. Very few pharmaceutical shipments are acquired over, say, a load board type of scenario and things like that. But all that being said, we can be just as vulnerable as anybody else in the space if you don't pay attention to who it is that you're doing business with and have a good knowledge of that. A perfect example is an instance that actually involves you guys. I mean, there was a over-the-counter shipment of pharmaceutical goods that ended up getting triple brokered. And this was just a couple months ago. Fortunately, based on some of the technology that Overhaul has and the cooperation that was extended by the shipper themselves, we were able to recover the shipment. What it does is it shows that nobody's immune to this particular type of illicit activity. It's something where you have to stay in the game all the time. You have to be alert. You have to pay attention. You have to mine as much of the intelligence that's made available through a wide variety of different areas. I remind my members and members of the HDA all the time, never let your guard down. I mean, there is no silver bullet to solving this problem. It's something that you have to be attentive to all the time.
And it is, it's a great point though, Chuck, as well, which is, my belief is always that supply chain is supply chain. And while the best intentions are, single brokerage and not to do anything untoward, at times it's a sense of urgency. Products have to get delivered. They have to reach their final destination. How quickly can we get things done? How quickly can we move it? In the other industries, especially consumer electronics, we're now in the middle of holiday season, and not having the product on shelf is equivalent of a lost sale. And so anything that has to be done to move that product tends to be done with that sense of urgency. It's not malicious. It's just the double brokering and even the triple brokering is just, sometimes it's a supply chain just stretching at the seams a little bit and trying to move product through. Ron, I mean, you see this a lot in terms of, when you look at the overall data, especially, in the US, this is a growing problem of fraudulent pickups. We're seeing a lot more of this double brokerage and triple brokerage, which is just really causing an alarm in the supply chain.
Yeah, no, when I look at the current state of the world from a theft standpoint and risk standpoint, I can't help not, dismiss that, broader industry has gone through big, digitization exercises and implementing new tech stacks across their supply chain operations. If you look at this from a criminologist standpoint, changes in technology drive new crime. Criminals find ways to exploit new technology. It's just a trend we're seeing that's, in my opinion, one of the key drivers is changing technology in the broader supply chain landscape. I do think that, industry will work to get their hands around this and solve these problems. But as Chuck said, it's going to continue to got to have your eye on the ball, because if you think you're safe one day, you may not be safe tomorrow.
That technology, that introduction of technology, a lot of the different things that are being introduced to speed up the way goods are actually distributed in our house and Ron's and mine and Dave's, your houses, that just opens vulnerability doors all over the place. And it causes us to have to modify our behavior and what we tell the clients. You hit the nail on the head, Dave, when you were talking about the volatility of the distribution aspect. One of the scariest things that I witness in the pharmaceutical space, for instance, is the launch of a new product. The day that product actually gets launched is pretty amazing. I mean, as far as trying to get that product out, get it to the shelves on that particular date. It's not that, security is thrown to the wind, but it speeds up that logistic process. And anytime you do that, the opportunities are there to take shortcuts, and the shortcuts are what's going to hurt.
Yeah. Again, it is my philosophy has been that the physical supply chain and the digital supply chain have been moving at different speeds, and the physical supply chain was generally ahead. And in the last 5 years, the digital supply chain has not only caught up, but it's now surpassed. And with new, Gen AI tools and everything else coming into the supply chain, this is actually going to create another level of risk, just because the physical supply chain is still actually quite transactional. It's still quite manual, and we have to be very careful about that enhanced speed of transaction, because while it may make sense from a digital perspective, on the physical side, you might actually be opening yourself up, Chuck, as you say, to potentially more risk. And I'm not sure that anybody's got their head completely around this transformation yet. It's going to become, supply chains are going to become, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but they're going to become more intelligent. Products are going to start to understand a little bit more about their place in the universe and where they actually are. We're going to start moving away from just origins and destinations, and an inventory is going to start to become not only more visible, but more transactional through the supply chain. And we get very focused on that as a capability going forward, which is going to enable, but we tend to always forget about the risk part of it, which is, and by doing that, what are we enabling? Because the crooks that we're continually fighting against are also not sitting still. They're also trying to find the right ways to penetrate the supply chain and find those points of weakness. How do you embrace that with your members in the HDA? What are they concerned about right now? I mean, they've had a terrible year. I mean, between tariffs and well, I'll just stop there. Between tariffs and everything else that is complex.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head.
It's been a crazy year. How are your members actually, how are they thinking about when does this ease off? What does 2026 look like? And how do we make sure that we do stay ahead of the criminals in terms of keeping our supply chain safe?
The tariffs is a whole separate type of a thing where different pharmaceutical companies are trying to leverage their manufacturing capabilities and where it's done and how it's done to try to appease the government and possibly limit the number of tariffs. As far as the integrity of their supply chains, I mean, it's somewhat cyclical. I mean, right now, the products that are the most popular are all the weight loss products. I mean, you're talking about Ozempic, Wegovy, things like that. And bad guys know that, and they've attempted in a number of different ways to either counterfeit those types of products or divert those types of products or pilfer those products within a supply chain and things like that. The companies that manufacture those products, their security contingents are working hard to be able to harden those supply chains and how those particular types of things are moved. It depends on the popularity of the product. And it's the same for hard goods as well. I mean, look at what happens let's take Jamaica for an example. Jamaica is devastated right now. And what Jamaica needs more than anything else is construction equipment. I mean, construction pieces to be able to rebuild their infrastructure. If you're a cargo thief, or if you're someone looking to take advantage of that illicitly, that's what you're after. I mean, those are the things you're going to target. Those are the things you're going to try to either steal or reintroduce into legitimate supply chains where you have obtained it illegitimately. It's kind of the same in our industry. It's that sort of a way. We now share intelligence a lot better than we used to. There are certain security organizations within pharma. There's the Pharmaceutical Security Institute that concentrates more on counterfeiting. There's my group, which looks more at the supply chain itself and the movement of goods. There's NADI, the National Association of Drug Diversion Investigators. They look at hospitals and the distribution of pharmaceutical products there. Each one of these organizations used to act not independently, but we didn't necessarily talk to each other as much as we should. Now we do. Now we share intelligence literally on a weekly basis. And it's helped us to harden our supply chain. It hasn't solved the problem, but it's made it a lot harder for a bad guy to target us and have success.
And it is, again, a lot of the time, I think in the industry, not just from a healthcare and pharmaceutical standpoint, but across the other industries, the crime is thought of as opportunistic as opposed to organized. And in the same way that, that your organization has been able to start to pull together these different resources, Ron, we've also sort of seen as well that that's happening on the criminal side as well. I've never thought about crime as a demand and supply equation, but Chuck, to your point, it's kind of like, well, the most popular things are obviously going to be the most popular targets for the thieves because they know they can move them very quickly. But Ron, some of the conversations that we've had recently have been around this wave of organized crime and the true organization of not just individual gangs, but how they're actually working together and doing something quite unique.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's safe to say that, organized crime has become more organized. And it's also expanding to, known transnational criminal organizations that have been around for years. And they're now kind of putting one of their focus points on the supply chain, not only for theft, but more contraband or smuggling. But we've seen new entrants into the supply chain, criminal, targeting from longstanding criminal organizations that historically did not attack the supply chain, and primarily outside the country, or just a reinvigorated focus of transnational criminal organizations, targeting the supply chain. And they're also copycatting each other. We're seeing crime trends that were in the U.S. for the last 3-4 years are now starting to pop up in Europe and pop up in different parts of the world. Fraudulent theft in Europe was never a big thing. It happened, but right now, one of the dominating risks in Europe is stealing cargo, via fraud, with very similar tactics used in the U.S. for the last many years. So it's an ongoing battle. It's an arms race, and I think we're Overhaul's positioned to tackle that tackle that risk, but it's going to take, on our part, continued, investment in intelligence, investment in tools that will mitigate that risk.
Right. And it is, I think that's the right way to talk about it. It is an arms race. And Chuck, whenever you're meeting with your members in the HDA, is that the way that they think about it as well? Do they think about this as these aren't one-off opportunistic type of things? Like we're each of the industries is being targeted. And to your point, when you have a super popular drug like Ozempic or something like that, and the criminal gangs know that they can move that really quickly on the black market, but also they know that that's readily available to turn into cash. Is this something that your members actually, is this something that they talk about? Is this something that they consider? And what are the things that are going to move or change that? Is it just more collaboration, closer collaboration with law enforcement as well? What are the things that we can do?
The improvement of the technology surrounding the recording of those products as they move through a supply chain. The DSCSA program that has taken 10 years to be able to create, which allows us now to track product literally from cradle to grave and acts as a way of identifying someone trying to interject into a legitimate supply chain or remove from a legitimate supply chain types of products and things like that. That's one of the defenses that we foresaw, and quite a while ago, and is now working well. It's that sharing of intelligence. What happened to me? How does it affect what could potentially happen to you? Those types of things. Always looking around. We never thought as an industry until recently about how much of that organized crime that you just mentioned comes from outside of the United States and the type of damage that can actually do. One of the things I was very surprised with learning recently was the amount of dispatching of legitimate freight that actually occurs outside of the U.S. It doesn't occur inside the U.S. It occurs from Eastern Europe. And looking at that, the HDA also has a good distribution practice accreditation program where we look at how a particular service provider, be it a trucking firm, a 3PL, a warehouse, insurance company, and even a manufacturer or distributor themselves, how they move product around. Do they do it from a quality standpoint the way they should be doing it, but in a parallel way, do they move it in a secure way as well? We grade that, and ultimately we hand out an accredited status to that particular entity if they do things that we believe enhance the integrity of the supply chain.
I like that, and I like the fact that there's finally some rigor being put into that. And I mean, again, at Overhaul, this is a lot of what we've been trying to do as well in terms of creating that risk scoring opportunity. So maybe not at the HDA level of accreditation, but I know Ron's team in particular have spent a lot of time actually understanding the profiles and the risks associated, Ron, right? And then actually, signing some level of measure to that to help our customers actually understand the risk that they might be undertaking.
Yeah, correct. We're, in our programs today, we risk score every shipment real time, and that can be used for real time action, but it also can be used in the aggregate to look at your risk profile, over weeks or months or quarters, and, use that data to take action. Where are my risks increasing? Where are my risks decreasing? Maybe where do I need to put some more emphasis on certain operations where we see risks trending up? And those drill it down to a real-time risk score on an individual shipment, which can be done systematically and reported out in dashboards. It's a very effective tool for management to understand where their organization is going from a risk standpoint.
And and ultimately, this has to become we want this to become some level of predictive monitoring. And Chuck, I think that's the next phase for the industry and your industry in particular is to be able to start to build those predictive muscles using some of the latest technology to help your members actually understand truly the risk and then use the accredited partners to be able to minimize any outstanding risk.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, you may kind of light a little bit of the Starsky nudge car in the back. I remember this distinctly. 20 some odd years ago, I'm on a loading dock of a major pharmaceutical manufacturer, and I'm doing an assessment, a physical security assessment of the warehouse that the product is in. Truck pulls up, door opens up, truck gets loaded, they close the door, and the driver drives away. And I look at the guy on the loading dock and I said, just out of curiosity, who was that? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, who was that? I mean, he goes, well, that was such and such trucking company. Yeah, but who's driving the truck? And how are you going to know when they get to where they're going? He goes, well, they will. I mean, they always do. I mean, they'll pick it up and do that. And we look at the level of scrutiny today where we don't even let somebody on the property until at the guard shack, we know that, or we hope to know that that's the guy that's supposed to be here. And he's driving the truck he's supposed to be driving. And he has the code or the link or whatever it takes to be able to authenticate that he's the right guy to be able to do this. That's the sophistication it's gotten to. And to your point, I mean, we can take that now and be predictable towards future shipments and things like that as they move through the supply chain to try to make them more secure.
I like that, and I love that story. And also, it's a nice way to bring us back to where we started with Starsky and Hutch. So I feel very secure in that. First of all, that we've got Ron, consolidating a lot of this risk from the industry and bringing that intelligence layer to that risk. And then Chuck, it's people like yourself and the HDA who are really continuing to drive us forward in the right way, and not only keep your members safe, but also keep them ahead of the criminals that we're continually fighting against. Ron, Chuck, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, a brilliant discussion, and really, really enjoy your stories and your insights. Thanks everyone for listening. If you like our content, give us a thumbs up. If you want us to talk about something else, then let us know. Thank you so much.